The ethics and implications of rewilding. Rewilding is the effort to restore or rehabilitate degraded or damaged ecosystems by reversing the negative impacts of human activity. The main methods of rewilding are habitat restoration, reforestation, reintroducing native species, and eliminating invasive species. This process encompasses both vegetation and animals. As you can see on the right, I have put an example of rewilding land and its species down in Scotland. The physical appearance is much healthier than before and it looks like a success. But in order to fully understand the process, one must also look at the ethics and the implications. Here I have provided a list of considerations when looking at the ethics of rewilding in any location. Firstly, one needs to ensure that the species are able to survive and will not experience harm or the repetition of extinction. Secondly, the consideration of how convenient it is to those around the targeted land. Whomever is rewilding must consider all stakeholders, communities, and indigenous people, and make sure that they will not be harmed or affected by reintroducing native species. For example, if you are bringing in predators that could not only upset the ecosystem, but also affect the humans surrounding that specific ecosystem. The third ethical thought is something called non-interventionism. Some argue that it is unethical to intervene in nature and that humans should not attempt to manage or control ecosystems. Whereas this argument can be contrasted with the idea that humans were the first ones responsible for disrupting ecosystems in the first place, meaning they should take ownership and remedy what they messed up. The last thought is prioritization. One needs to consider which areas are most important and where rewilding will have the greatest impact. Since it isn't a free or harmless endeavor, in-depth thought is required as to where rewilding will have the most positive effect on both the people and the nature. On the top right, you can see an example of urban rewilding. Singapore is incorporating modern structures to reintroduce native vegetation for the purpose of shade, filtering rainwater, and absorbing heat, both to the benefit of the nature and to the benefit of the people living in Singapore. Another example to look at is Project Frankfurt, Hanover, and Dessau in Germany. They have chose to set aside plots of land to let nature take over in order to reintroduce a healthy ecosystem. Both are different methods of rewilding, but both seem to be very effective. There are both positive and negative implications to rewilding. The first beneficial implication would be that increase in native vegetation would help to reduce climate change and erosion. This is due to the plant's ability to both absorb heat and to also hold soil in place with its roots. The second positive implication is that there would be an increase in biodiversity. This is positive because biodiversity is shown to decrease risk of spread of diseases, a better support for the ecosystems that we rely on, and even more resources for humans to use. The last reason is the reset of the food chain. Whether the species coming in are plants or animals, they are all part of the food chain, and when there are more resources to eat, then the population increases. But this could also be a negative as seen by the first example on the right side. When introducing new species of animals, it might create competition with already existing species who have adjusted. This is called exploitation in economy, where one species uses more of a limited resource, leading to the detriment of another species. This could also disrupt the food chain instead of helping it. The last negative that I will focus on is that rewilding could potentially bring in new diseases. This is especially if one is taking a species existing somewhere else and reintroducing it to its natural habitat. The already present species' immune systems would not be able to protect themselves from new diseases, and that will cause an even bigger disruption in that ecosystem. This could also go the other way, where the species being introduced doesn't have the immunity to diseases present in the habitat it is entering. There are both positive and negative implications to both sides, but in order to see the whole picture and understand what one should do, a focus on the ethics would help form a more solid decision, and that's why it's important to take both into account. A real-life example of success is that in the early 20th century, the wolves in Yellowstone National Park were hunted to extinction. There were none present. As a result, the elk population experienced a trophic cascade. This is where the population of the predator decreases, allowing the next level down, which in this example is the elk, to increase in population size. And eventually, in 1994, 15 wolves were reintroduced into Yellowstone National Park, and equilibrium was restored and the elk numbers went down. And they were able to live in a cohesive environment and live together, and it was a full success.